She had endured 18 hours of labor, a grueling 18 hours of pain, 18 hours of desperate prayers, all leading to the moment she would hold her babies for the first time. And when those three perfect newborns were finally placed in her arms, her happiness lasted for exactly 60 seconds. That is because her husband walked through the door, not with flowers, not with joyful tears, but with divorce papers. His mother and sister followed, filming the entire scene on a phone. They ripped her children from her embrace before she could say goodbye. They had already taken her childhood home while she was distracted by endless fertility treatments. They had the police write her off as unstable. They thought they had left her with nothing, but they were wrong about one thing. Her mother, the woman everyone saw as just a simple nurse, had been protecting a secret valued at $1.2 billion. The instant Evelyn signed those divorce papers, she was not just ending her marriage. She was activating a powerful plan her mother had been building for 15 years. What follows is a story of deep betrayal, billion-dollar revenge, and a mother who would burn down an entire empire to bring her children home. Make sure you stay until the end, because the second this family grasps the magnitude of their mistake is the second their whole world unravels. This story will teach you a powerful truth. Your worth is never determined by those who fail to see it. Sometimes the people who try hardest to destroy you are actually setting you free. And when you finally remember who you are, no amount of money, power, or cruelty can keep you down. The fluorescent lights of Metropolitan General Hospital cast a cold, sterile glow that felt entirely wrong for the miracle taking place in room 412. Evelyn Carter lay in the delivery bed, her dark hair stuck to her sweaty forehead, her hospital gown completely soaked. Her entire body shook from the exhaustion of an 18-hour labor. But none of that mattered. The only thing in the universe that mattered were the three tiny bundles being cleaned and swaddled by nurses across the room. 3 babies, her babies. This came after 5 years of negative pregnancy tests, 5 years of fertility treatments that had shattered her body and crushed her soul. It had been 5 years of listening to her mother-in-law call her defective and worthless, but she had finally done it. The doctor, pulling off his surgical gloves, announced with a kind smile, "Triplets, 2 girls and a boy. They are all healthy, all perfect. Congratulations, Mrs. Lancaster. You did an amazing job." Evelyn wanted to reply, but the words were stuck in her throat. Tears streamed down her face as she watched the nurses wrap her babies in soft white blankets. She could hear their cries, 3 separate voices making their arrival known to the world, and that sound was the most beautiful symphony she had ever heard. "Can I hold them?" she whispered, her voice rough from hours of pushing. "Please, I have to hold them." "Of course, dear," answered Gloria Santos, the night nurse, who had stayed by Evelyn's side through the whole ordeal. Gloria was a woman in her early 50s with broad shoulders, gentle hands, and kind eyes that had seen more births than she could possibly remember. "Just let us get them all cleaned up for you." Evelyn nodded. Her arms were already physically aching with the intense need to hold her children to her chest. She had waited for this moment for so long. 5 years of hoping, praying, and crying herself to sleep in a grand mansion that had never once felt like a home. 5 years of being treated like a failure by people who saw her only value in the children she was unable to have. But now she had finally proven every single one of them wrong. The first baby was placed into her arms at precisely 9:47 in the evening. It was a girl with a surprising amount of dark hair and eyes that seemed to look at Evelyn's face with a wise, ancient soul. "Hello, beautiful," Evelyn whispered, gently touching her daughter's tiny fingers. "Hello, my sweet girl. I am your mama. I have waited so long to finally meet you." The baby made a tiny sound, not quite a cry, but more of an acknowledgement, and Evelyn felt her heart expand in a way she never knew was possible. This was real love. This was the kind of love that did not have conditions, or expectations, or cruelty that pretended to be concern. The second baby was settled into her other arm at 9:52. This was another girl, calmer than her sister, with observant eyes that seemed to be taking in the entire room. "And you," Evelyn said, tears now falling without restraint, "you are perfect too. Both of you, all of you." At 9:58, the third baby, a boy, was placed on her chest. He was the smallest of the three and had cried for only 10 seconds after being born before becoming peacefully quiet, as if he had already decided the world was more interesting to watch than to complain about. For a full 60 seconds, Evelyn Carter experienced what pure, complete happiness felt like. For 60 seconds, the agony of her labor vanished completely. For 60 seconds, the loneliness of the past 5 years melted away like fog in the sun. For 60 seconds, nothing else existed but her and her children, and the absolute certainty that everything she had gone through was worth it for this one single moment. She got only 60 seconds. Because at 10 o'clock on that Tuesday night in October, the door to room 412 swung open and Evelyn's husband entered. Garrett Lancaster was 35 years old, a Princeton graduate, and the sole heir to one of the most established fortunes on the East Coast. He had a face that belonged on the cover of a magazine, with sharp cheekbones, piercing blue eyes, and a smile that could talk anyone into doing anything. He was not smiling at that moment. He wore the exact same charcoal suit he had on at a charity gala 3 nights earlier, the same suit he was wearing when Evelyn's first contractions started and she called him, only to have another woman answer his phone. It was the same suit that likely still carried the scent of his mistress's perfume. In his hand, he held a manila envelope. Behind him was his mother, Margaret Lancaster, impeccably dressed in Chanel despite the late hour, her silver hair tied back in a tight, severe bun. The hairstyle seemed intentionally designed to highlight her sharp features and the coldness in her gray eyes. Margaret was 63 years old and had dedicated her entire life to mastering the art of making others feel insignificant. And she was smiling. That was the most sickening part. She was actually smiling as if she had been anticipating this very moment for her entire life. Trailing behind Margaret was Vivian, Garrett's younger sister, holding her phone up with the camera aimed directly at Evelyn's face. She was recording. Evelyn's exhausted mind fought to make sense of the scene in front of her. Why was Vivian recording this? Why did Garrett look so distant? Why was Margaret smiling like that? And why was Garrett holding an envelope instead of a bouquet of flowers? "Garrett," Evelyn said, her voice faint but filled with hope. "You made it. I was trying to call you, but I couldn't get through. The babies are here. We have 3 of them, 2 girls and a boy. They are so perfect, Garrett, just so perfect." Garrett did not acknowledge a single word she said. He just walked to the foot of her bed and stared at her with an expression she had never seen on his face. Then he tossed the manila envelope onto her chest. It landed on her hospital gown, which was still stained with blood and sweat, its sharp corner digging into her collarbone. "Sign it," Garrett said. His voice was completely flat, all business, as cold as a morning in January. "I am done with you." The words felt unreal. Evelyn stared at her husband, waiting for him to crack a smile, to laugh, to explain that this was all some horrible, twisted joke. But his face stayed like a mask of stone, his blue eyes showing no warmth or any sign that he understood what she had just been through. "What?" she managed to whisper. Margaret stepped closer, her heels clicking on the hospital floor, like a timer counting down. She opened her designer handbag, took out a silver pin, and pushed it into Evelyn's trembling hand. "Let us not make this a scene, dear," Margaret said, her voice as smooth as silk, but twice as cold. "You have fulfilled your purpose. You gave us what we required. Now, sign the documents and go away quietly. It is the very least you can do after all we have done for you." Evelyn looked down at the envelope resting on her. Her hands were shaking too much to get a firm grip, but she somehow managed to pull out the papers inside. Divorce papers. A petition for the dissolution of their marriage. The words swam in front of her, blurring together until she could hardly make them out. But a few phrases leaped out at her like daggers. Full custody of any children born during the marriage will be awarded to the Lancaster family. The petitioner gives up all rights to marital assets, property, and any financial support. The petitioner agrees to have no contact with the minor children without the express written permission of the custodial parent. They were taking absolutely everything from her: her marriage, her home, her financial security, and the most devastating blow of all, her children. "No," Evelyn breathed out. "No, this can't be happening. Garrett, please. We just had our babies. You cannot do this." Gloria Santos, the nurse who had been standing frozen against the wall since the Lancasters arrived, finally found her voice. "Excuse me," she said, stepping forward with her shoulders squared. "This woman just gave birth. She has been in labor for 18 hours. This is completely inappropriate, and I am going to have to ask you to leave." Margaret turned to look at Gloria with an expression someone might use to study a particularly disgusting insect. "This is a family matter," Margaret said coldly. "It does not concern you. I am her nurse. Her well-being absolutely concerns me, and I am telling you that serving divorce papers to a woman who is still recovering from childbirth is not only cruel, it may not even be legally binding given her current state." Margaret's smile did not fade. "We will see how long you keep that job," she said quietly. "I sit on the board of this hospital. I could have you terminated with a single phone call. Is that what you want? Over some woman you have known for less than a day?" Gloria set her jaw, refusing to back down. Evelyn felt a rush of gratitude for this stranger who was defending her when no one else would, but she also knew it was useless. The Lancasters ran this city. They had the police, the judges, and the politicians in their pocket, and it was clear they owned the hospital too. A single nurse, no matter how courageous, stood no chance against that kind of influence. Evelyn said softly, "Gloria, it is all right. I appreciate it, but it is all right." Gloria gave her a look filled with helpless anger, but she did take a step back. "Garrett?" Evelyn tried once more, her voice trembling. "Please, can we just talk about this? I have no idea what is going on. What did I do?" Garrett let out a sigh, as if her question was a chore. "What did you do wrong?" He shook his head slowly. "You existed, Evelyn. That was your mistake. You were a temporary fix, a means to an end. My mother chose you because you were easy to shape, easy to control, with a decent enough family background, but no money to give you any independence. You were just grateful enough to keep your mouth shut and do as you were told. You were never meant to be a permanent part of the family." His words felt like actual punches, knocking the wind out of her with each sentence. "But you told me you loved me," she whispered. "I said many things." Garrett's voice was completely flat, without a trace of emotion. "I told you whatever was necessary to get what our family needed from you, and now we have it." He motioned to the babies, who were still resting in their bassinets, completely unaware of the life-shattering moment happening around them. 3 healthy heirs. Our family's future is secure. We no longer require your services." Evelyn felt something inside her chest crack open. It was not her heart. Her heart had been slowly breaking for years, chipped away by 1,000 tiny acts of cruelty until it was mostly scar tissue. This was deeper, more fundamental. Or this was the last shred of hope she had been holding on to, that small, defiant belief that deep inside the cold man her husband had become, there was still a trace of the person who had charmed her at a charity event 6 years ago. The man who had gazed at her as if she were the only person in the room. The man who had vowed to love and protect her until his dying day. That man was a fiction. She had fallen in love with an act. "What happens to the children?" Evelyn asked, her voice stronger now, reinforced by the knowledge that she had absolutely nothing left to lose. "They are my children as well. You cannot just steal them from me." Margaret let out a laugh. It was a cold, sharp sound that bounced off the sterile hospital walls. "Oh, but we can, my dear." She took another document out of her purse, holding it up for Evelyn to see. "Do you recall the prenuptial agreement you signed? The one Garrett's attorneys told you was just a minor formality?" Evelyn remembered. She had been 26 years old, head over heels in love, and utterly convinced that a divorce would never be part of her real-life fairy tale. The contract had been 50 pages of dense legal language that she had barely looked at before signing her name. "You should have paid more attention when you read it," Margaret went on. "There was a specific clause hidden away in Section 14 that grants the Lancaster family complete custody of any children from the marriage if a divorce occurs. Complete custody, Evelyn. That means no visits, no phone calls, nothing." "That is not legal," Evelyn said weakly. "A prenup is not supposed to take away a mother's rights to her children." "It is legal if the mother signs away those rights, which you did. Your signature is right there on page 37. The room started to spin around Evelyn. "I had no idea. I did not realize what I was agreeing to. Your ignorance is not a valid defense, dear." Margaret's smile was victorious. "You signed that paper of your own free will. Nobody forced your hand or pressured you. You just put your faith in the wrong people, and now you are about to learn the consequences of that mistake." Vivian briefly lowered her phone to get closer to Evelyn's ear. "If it makes you feel any better," she whispered, "I told them from the start you would not last. 5 years is more than I gave you credit for, but at least you got to hold them for a minute, right? Some women do not even get that much." She stood up straight and went back to filming, her face a perfect mask of fake sympathy. Evelyn looked at her children, Emma, Sophia, James. She had picked those names out herself, in secret, never saying them out loud to a family that would have instantly dismissed any idea she had. 3 perfect little babies, just starting their lives, with no idea they were about to be ripped away from their mother. She considered putting up a fight. She thought about screaming, refusing to sign, and causing a scene so big that the hospital staff would have to get involved. But then Margaret spoke again, and Evelyn understood just how completely she was cornered. "Just sign the papers quietly," Margaret said, her voice now calm and almost gentle, "and we will allow you to leave with some dignity. You can go start a new life, somewhere far away, and pretend this was all just a bad dream. And if you say no, we will have you institutionalized at Greenbrier Psychiatric Hospital for postpartum psychosis. We already have the documents drawn up. Dr. Harrison is a close friend of the family. He will sign any papers I put in front of him. You will live out the next few months in a padded cell. So heavily medicated, you will not know your own name, while we teach your children to forget you ever existed." Margaret let the silence hang in the air. "In the end, you lose the babies either way. The only choice you have is how much pain you want to go through first." Evelyn glanced at Gloria, who stood with her hands clenched into fists, silent tears rolling down her cheeks. She looked at her babies, so tiny and pure, so undeserving of the cold family they were born into. She looked at the pen in her hand, the documents on her chest, and the man who was her husband in name only. And then she made a choice. It was not the choice Margaret was expecting. It was not the defeated, broken surrender of a woman who had been utterly destroyed. Evelyn made a different kind of choice, a secret one, a plan that would take 6 months to set in motion and demand every last bit of strength she possessed. She decided she was going to ruin them, every single one of them. But that would not happen today. Today she was bleeding, exhausted, and utterly powerless. Today her only job was to survive. She had to get out of that room, out of that hospital, and find a safe place where she could think. With a hand that was now perfectly steady, she took the pen and signed her name on the line. The second the ink was dry, Margaret leaned down and pulled the wedding ring right off Evelyn's finger. "This is a family heirloom," Margaret said, inspecting the diamond under the harsh, fluorescent light as if it were a prize she had just won. Garrett collected the signed papers, glanced at the signature, then folded them precisely and put them inside his coat pocket. "I want your belongings out of the house by the end of this week," he said, not even making eye contact. "Anything you do not take will be given to charity." With that, he turned and left the room. Margaret followed, but she stopped in the doorway to deliver one last insult. "Your mother would be so ashamed of you," she said in a low voice. "Such a complete waste." And then she was gone. Vivian stopped her recording and gave Evelyn a small, mocking wave. "Bye now, sister-in-law." It was fun. She skipped out of the room as if she were leaving a party, not the scene of a crime. Then came the final, most painful blow. A stern-faced nanny in a gray uniform, a woman Evelyn had never met, walked into the room. She went to the bassinets, unlocked the wheels, and started pushing them out. "Wait!" Evelyn cried, trying to sit up through a wave of pain. "Please, just let me hold them one last time. Please, just for a second." The nanny did not even spare her a glance. "I have my orders from Mrs. Lancaster," she said in a monotone voice. "No contact." And with those words, Evelyn's children were gone. She did not even get a chance to say goodbye. Gloria came over and sat on the bed, taking Evelyn's hand in hers. "I am just so sorry," she said, her voice heavy with emotion. "In 30 years as a nurse, I have never witnessed anything so awful. I did not know human beings could be that cruel." Evelyn just stared at the ceiling, feeling completely empty. The shock was like a thick fog, numbing her to everything and holding back the tidal wave of grief she knew was coming. "This was all planned," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "They were probably planning this for years. They just needed me to provide the heirs first." "What will you do now?" Evelyn had no idea how to even begin to answer that. She had no money, no place to live, no family, and no friends that Margaret had not already pushed away with clever rumors and social games. She had absolutely nothing, but she was still alive. She was still breathing. And somewhere inside the empty shell she had become, a tiny spark of her old self remained. The fighter her mother had raised, the woman who had put herself through nursing school while taking care of a dying parent, the girl who never ran from a fight. "I do not know yet," Evelyn said, speaking slowly, "but I will figure something out." Gloria gave her hand a firm squeeze. "You are much stronger than you think you are, honey. I saw it the second you arrived. You are a fighter. You just lost sight of that for a little while." Evelyn looked at this woman, a total stranger who had shown her more compassion in 18 hours than her husband had in 5 years. "Thank you, Gloria. Thank you for all of this." Gloria took a small card from her pocket and placed it in Evelyn's hand. "This has my personal cell number on it. If you ever need help with anything, and I mean anything, you call me." Evelyn clutched the card and tucked it into the pocket of her hospital gown, holding it close to her heart. She couldn't have known it then, but a single act of kindness was the first step toward toppling an entire dynasty. To truly grasp how Evelyn Carter found herself signing divorce papers in a hospital bed, you need to see the woman she was before the Lancaster family shattered her spirit. Evelyn Marie Carter came into this world 32 years ago, born in a little house on Maple Street, on the less fortunate side of a town split by wealth and influence. Her father vanished before she was born, leaving her mother, Helen Carter, to raise her alone on a nurse's meager pay and a powerful will to survive. Helen Carter was not a gentle woman. Her hands were rough from a lifetime of labor. Her words could slice through any excuse, and her eyes could spot a lie from a mile away. Despite her tough exterior, she was the most loving person Evelyn knew. "You are destined for great things, baby girl," Helen would tell her, whenever Evelyn came home in tears, bullied by the wealthy kids at school for her secondhand clothes. Those people, they might have money, but wealth cannot buy you intelligence or kindness or inner strength. You possess qualities that no amount of money can ever purchase, and someday you will prove it to all of them. Evelyn took her mother's words to heart. She excelled in her studies, secured scholarships for college, and followed in her mother's path to become a nurse. She graduated with top honors and landed a position at the most prestigious hospital in the city. She was filled with pride, confident in her abilities, and ready to conquer the world. That is when she met Garrett Lancaster. It was at a charity ball 6 years ago. Evelyn was volunteering, passing out hors d'oeuvres to guests whose accessories were worth more than her yearly income. She felt out of place the entire evening, acutely aware she didn't fit into this universe of sparkling chandeliers and high-fashion dresses. Then, a man appeared beside her, devastatingly handsome, impossibly charming, and far beyond her reach. "You look like you would rather be anywhere but here," he remarked, with a grin that made the corners of his blue eyes crinkle. "Is it that easy to tell?" He let out a laugh, a deep, warm sound that made her heart skip a beat. Only for someone who feels the exact same way. "My name is Garrett, by the way. I'm Evelyn." "Well, Evelyn," he said, smoothly offering his arm, "how about we ditch this circus and find a quiet place to really talk?" She knew she should have refused. She should have remembered that men like Garrett Lancaster don't end up with women like her. A small voice inside her head screamed that it was all too good to be true. But she was young and lonely, and his charm was overwhelming. So, she accepted his arm and allowed him to guide her onto a moonlit terrace, where they talked for hours. He asked about her job, her aspirations, her life story. He listened intently, as if every word she spoke was the most interesting thing he had ever heard. He looked at her as if she were the most stunning woman he had ever seen. By the end of the night, Evelyn was already falling for him. Their romance was a whirlwind. For an entire month, flowers arrived at the hospital daily. There were romantic dinners at restaurants she could only dream of, and weekend getaways to destinations she had only seen in magazines. Garrett was attentive, considerate, and seemed genuinely fascinated by who she was. He wanted to know all about her childhood, her mother, and her dreams for the future. He spoke of his own desires to escape his family's rigid expectations and create a life with real meaning. He made her feel cherished, important, and deeply loved. He made her believe she had finally found her soulmate. 6 months after their first meeting, he proposed with a diamond ring that likely cost more than her entire childhood home. Evelyn said yes without a second thought, her eyes filled with happy tears, certain she had found her fairy tale ending. Her mother, however, was not convinced. "I don't trust him," Helen stated flatly the evening Evelyn showed her the ring. His family has old money. The kind of fortune changes a person, baby girl. It makes them believe they can do whatever they please with no repercussions. You don't even know the man, Mama. I know his kind. I have seen them in the hospital plenty of times. They treat the nursing staff like personal servants. They act like the rules don't apply to them. They take what they desire and discard it when they're done. Garrett is not like that, Evelyn argued back. He loves me. He is different. Helen looked at her daughter with sorrow in her eyes. I hope to God you're right, baby girl. I truly do. But make me a promise. Promise me that you will never forget who you are, no matter what happens, no matter how much wealth you're surrounded by. Remember that you are Evelyn Carter. You are strong, intelligent, and you can achieve anything. Don't you ever let anyone make you forget that. Evelyn made the promise. Then, over the next 5 years, she slowly and completely broke it. 8 months before the wedding, Helen Carter died from cancer. It was terrifyingly fast. One day, she seemed perfectly healthy. The next, she was coughing up blood, and just 3 months later, she was gone. Evelyn took a leave from her job to be with her mother during those final weeks, holding her hand as she faded away, vowing to make her proud. The loss left Evelyn shattered. Helen had been her rock, her guide, her source of unwavering strength. Without her, Evelyn felt lost in a world that now seemed colder and far more menacing. Garrett was her pillar of support through those dark months. He held her as she wept. He sat with her at the funeral, and he helped her go through her mother's possessions. He appeared to be the perfect partner, solid, reliable, and dedicated to helping her heal. In hindsight, Evelyn saw that her mother's death was the true beginning of the end. Helen Carter was the only one who had seen past Garrett's polished exterior, the only one who could have warned Evelyn of the coming storm, and the only one who would have fought for her when the Lancasters began their systematic effort to erase her. With Helen gone, Evelyn was completely unprotected, a vulnerability the Lancasters eagerly exploited. The wedding was a grand, expensive affair, totally orchestrated by Margaret Lancaster. Evelyn had pictured a small, intimate ceremony, perhaps in the garden of her childhood home on Maple Street. Margaret, however, demanded a cathedral wedding with 400 guests, almost none of whom Evelyn knew. Evelyn had dreamed of wearing her mother's simple, elegant wedding gown. Instead, Margaret presented her with a $50,000 designer creation that made her feel as though she were drowning in layers of fabric and suffocating expectations. Evelyn wanted to write her own vows. Margaret handed her a pre-written script that had been recited by Lancaster brides for 3 generations. "This is how it is done in our family," Margaret said, her smile never quite reaching her cold eyes. "I am certain you understand." Evelyn did not understand at all, but she was too consumed by grief and blinded by what she thought was love to put up a fight. So, she put on the dress, recited the hollow words, and walked down the aisle of a church she had never set foot in, toward a future she couldn't possibly foresee. And when the priest declared them husband and wife, Evelyn truly believed she was starting the happiest part of her life. She had no idea she was really walking into a cage. The first year of their marriage was tolerable. Garrett was still charming, still doting, still acting the part of the loving husband. They resided in a guest house on the sprawling Lancaster estate, which Margaret casually explained was just a temporary arrangement until they found a suitable home. They attended endless family dinners, charity events, and high society parties, where Evelyn forced a smile until her cheeks ached, trying desperately to blend in with people who looked at her like she was an embarrassing blemish on their pristine family legacy. But even in those early days, the warning signs were there. Margaret's relentless criticism of everything Evelyn did, from the way she dressed to the way she spoke. It was the way she held her fork at dinner. Nothing was ever good enough for them. Nothing could ever live up to the Lancaster standard. Then there was Garrett's habit of siding with his mother in every single argument, no matter how insignificant. He would always tell Evelyn she was being overly sensitive, insisting his mother had good intentions and that Evelyn just had to make more of an effort to fit in. Her independence faded so gradually that she barely even registered it was happening. At first, she gave up seeing her friends from work because a family event always seemed to take precedence. Next, she stopped going by the house on Maple Street after Margaret called it depressing to live in the past. Eventually, she stopped working at the hospital because Lancaster wives simply did not have jobs. By the end of the first year, Evelyn could hardly recognize the person staring back at her in the mirror. During the second year, Margaret's control became total. "A Lancaster wife does not work," Margaret declared during a family dinner, as casually as if she were talking about the weather. "It makes the family look bad. People might start to think we cannot provide for you." "But I love being a nurse," Evelyn pleaded, glancing at Garrett for some kind of support. "I dedicated so much to my career. I am excellent at my job." Garrett refused to look up from his meal. "My mother has a point," he said, his voice low. "It does seem strange. Perhaps you could find some volunteer work to do instead." Evelyn felt something shatter inside her. She scanned the faces around the dinner table, her new family. Margaret was smiling, completely satisfied with herself. Richard, Garrett's father, wasn't even bothering to listen. Vivian had a smirk on her face like she had just won a private victory. And then there was Garrett, the man who had vowed to love, honor, and cherish her, now choosing his mother over his wife without a second thought. "I will consider it," Evelyn said softly, though she knew what her decision would be. She understood she would give in, because that is what she always did now. That is the person she had allowed herself to become. 2 weeks later, she handed in her resignation at the hospital. 2 months after that, she allowed her nursing license to expire. "Mama," she thought to herself, as she watched her entire career vanish. "I am so sorry. I promised I would always remember who I was, but I think I am starting to forget." The third year was all about the pressure to get pregnant. "You've been married for 2 years, Margaret stated over tea one afternoon. "It is time you started thinking about having children." "We are trying," Evelyn replied, feeling a hot blush of embarrassment creep up her neck. "These things just take time." Margaret's eyes grew sharp. "Time is a luxury that we do not have. The Lancaster family requires heirs. Your main responsibility, as Garrett's wife, is to produce them. Everything else comes second." She made it sound so cold and businesslike, as if Evelyn wasn't a human being but some kind of machine, valued only for her ability to have babies. Margaret began scheduling monthly fertility appointments without ever consulting Evelyn. She brought in specialists, demanded tests, and talked about Evelyn's reproductive health at family dinners as if it were public information. "Is there any news?" she would ask at the start of every month, her gaze filled with pointed expectation. And each month, Evelyn would have to shake her head no, feeling the crushing weight of another failure settle upon her. "I am doing everything the doctors are telling me to," Evelyn said one day, her voice shaking with frustration. "I am taking all the vitamins, I am on the special diet, and I am timing everything perfectly. I do not know what more you expect from me." Margaret gave her a look that was almost pity. "I expect you to succeed, my dear, because if you are unable to give us children, then I am afraid we have no real reason to keep you here." The fourth year was when Garrett gave up pretending entirely. The late nights at his office began, followed by business trips that went on for far too long. Then came the lipstick on his shirt collar that was not her color, and the scent of a strange perfume that clung to him when he finally decided to come home. Evelyn knew exactly what was going on. She wasn't an idiot, but she was completely trapped and broken, with absolutely nowhere to turn. She tried to confront him about it once. "Is there someone else?" she asked, keeping her voice steady even though her heart was hammering. Garrett stared at her with such disgust that she instinctively took a step back. "Maybe if you were a more interesting person," he said, "then I might actually want to come home." The sheer cruelty of his words knocked the wind out of her. But instead of fighting for herself, instead of demanding even a little respect, instead of just walking out that door and never turning back, Evelyn apologized. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I will try to be better." And she despised herself for it. The 5th year became a time of open warfare. Margaret dropped all pretense of being polite. She found fault with everything Evelyn did, from the style of her hair and the clothes she wore to the way she supposedly breathed too loud during dinner. She would make casual remarks about fertile women and empty wombs, and about the importance of knowing when you have failed. Vivian eagerly joined the attacks, thrilled to have a target for her own deep-seated insecurities. She would post pictures of large, happy families on social media, tagging Evelyn with captions like "goals" and "maybe one day." Richard started ignoring Evelyn completely, acting as if she didn't exist, and Garrett moved into the guest room, blaming her anxiety, her neediness, and her constant state of disappointment as his reasons for not being able to sleep beside her anymore. Evelyn became a ghost in her own house. She took all her meals alone. She went to family functions alone. She would cry by herself in the bathroom of the grand mansion that now felt like her personal prison. She thought about leaving. The thought crossed her mind every single day, but she had nowhere to go. She had no money of her own, no job, no family, and no friends left. The Lancasters had systematically cut off every single person she could have turned to for help, making her completely reliant on the very people who hated her. She was utterly trapped, and she was starting to believe all the horrible things they said about her, that she was worthless, that she was broken, and that she deserved their cruelty because she had failed at the only thing a wife was good for. Then, in the 5th year of her marriage, Evelyn found out she was pregnant. She just stared at the 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test, her hands trembling and her heart racing, feeling a flicker of something she had not felt for years. Hope. Maybe this could fix everything. Maybe Garrett would start to love her again. Maybe Margaret would finally accept her into the family. Maybe now she would have a real reason to go on living. She was so incredibly naive. She did not understand that this pregnancy was not a new chapter. It was the final move in their game. The Lancasters had been waiting for this exact moment. They had kept her around, putting up with her presence, and enduring her existence for 5 long years, all for this one and only purpose. They needed her to produce an heir. And as soon as she had served that purpose, she was of no more use to them. 24 hours after she signed the divorce papers, Evelyn Carter was released from Metropolitan General Hospital with nothing but the clothes she was wearing and $47 in cash that a kind nurse named Gloria Santos had slipped into her hand. The nurse at the discharge desk looked at her with obvious pity. "Is there anyone we can call for you, Mrs. Lancaster? A relative? A friend?" "My name is Carter," Evelyn said quietly. She stepped out of the hospital doors into a dreary October morning. The cold wind sliced through her thin jacket, a harsh reminder that she was now totally and completely on her own. She did not have a phone. The one she had used for the last 5 years was on the Lancaster family's mobile plan, and they had disconnected it just moments after Garrett filed for divorce. She had no credit cards. They were all in her married name, and every last one of them had been canceled or frozen solid. She did not even have her wallet. It had vanished sometime during the whirlwind of childbirth and divorce, probably taken by the same people who had stripped her of everything else. She had Gloria's phone number scribbled on a business card she had tucked into her bra. She had $47, and she had the address of her childhood home, the little house on Maple Street that her mother had left for her in her will. That was everything she possessed in the entire world. Evelyn spent some of her precious little money on a taxi to Maple Street. The neighborhood looked exactly as she remembered it. It was full of modest houses, with small front yards, kids playing on the sidewalks, and working-class families just trying to get by. It was not fancy or impressive, but it felt real in a way the massive Lancaster estate never had. She felt a spark of something that almost felt like hope. When the taxi finally turned onto her street, this house belonged to her. Helen Carter had left it to her completely paid off, with no mortgage and no debts, just a simple deed that transferred the ownership from her mother to her. The Lancasters could take everything else from her, but they could not take this house away. This was her safety net. This was her new beginning, her one real chance to start her life over. The taxi stopped in front of number 47, and the small glimmer of hope in Evelyn's heart instantly turned to ice. A heavy padlock was clamped on the front door, and a sign was posted in the window. It read, "Property of Lancaster Holdings, LLC." "No," Evelyn whispered in disbelief. She hastily threw some cash at the driver and scrambled out of the car, sprinting up the familiar walkway she had traveled thousands of times. As a little girl, she grabbed the cold, heavy padlock and pulled on it with all her might, her hands scraping raw against the cold metal until they were bleeding. "This is my house," she sobbed, to the empty street. "My mother gave me this house." The padlock was indifferent to her pain, to her inheritance, and to the heartbroken woman bleeding on her own doorstep. It simply hung there, a cold, unyielding symbol, locking away the very last piece of home Evelyn had in the world. She collapsed to the ground, her back sliding down the door, and for the first time since that hospital room, she finally let the tears flow. It was only later that she pieced together what had happened. 18 months ago, while Evelyn was consumed by fertility treatments and the slow, painful collapse of her marriage, the Lancasters had secretly purchased her childhood home through a shell corporation. The sale was legally binding because Evelyn had signed the documents herself, without realizing it, during one of Margaret's many paperwork sessions. "Just sign here, dear. It is only some estate planning." Evelyn had signed without reading a single word, trusting her mother-in-law just as she had naively trusted everyone in that family. And just like that, she was homeless. She found a payphone outside a convenience store 3 blocks from her old home and dialed 911. "I need to report a kidnapping," she stated, her voice surprisingly firm. "My children were taken from me last night at Metropolitan General Hospital. 3 newborns. The people who took them are named Lancaster." The dispatcher on the other end was polite, but his skepticism was obvious. "Ma'am, could you provide me with more details?" "Who exactly took the children?" "Their father, my ex-husband, and his mother. They handed me divorce papers while I was still in my delivery bed, and then they just took my babies." A long, telling silence followed on the other end of the line. "Ma'am, if this is related to a custody issue, that is a civil matter. You will need to speak with a family court lawyer. This is not a custody dispute. It is kidnapping. I never consented to giving them my children. I was forced to sign papers while I was still recovering from giving birth. This cannot be legal. I understand you are upset, ma'am. I will send an officer to your location to take a report." "What is your location?" 15 minutes later, a patrol car arrived with 2 police officers. Officer Daniels was a heavy-set man in his late 40s who had a thick mustache, He also had the kind of eyes that had long ago stopped seeing women as actual people. His partner, Officer Mitchell, was a younger woman who, at the very least, had the grace to look uncomfortable. "All right, let me make sure I have this right," Officer Daniels said. His eyes traveled up and down Evelyn's body with poorly hidden scorn. "You're telling us that the Lancaster family took your children?" "Yes, from the hospital just last night. They made me sign divorce papers and then they stole my babies." "The Lancaster family?" Officer Daniels echoed. "You mean Richard and Margaret Lancaster? The same people who financed the new wing for our police station?" Evelyn felt her stomach drop. "Yes." Officer Daniels shot a meaningful glance at his partner. "Ma'am, I am going to have to ask you to calm down." "I am calm. I am telling you that my children were taken from me without my consent." "The Lancasters are highly respected people in this town," Officer Daniels stated slowly, using the tone one might use with a difficult child. "Are you positive you aren't just confused? Maybe experiencing some postpartum issues?" "I am not having postpartum issues. I am telling you that a crime has been committed." Officer Mitchell finally spoke, her voice much softer. "Perhaps you should speak with someone, a professional. Try to get some sleep. You've had quite an ordeal." "I do not need sleep. I need my children." But the officers were already stepping back, their posture signaling that the discussion was finished. "We will file a report," Officer Daniels said, "but I highly recommend you find a lawyer if you intend to take this any further. This seems like a civil issue to us." They departed without writing down a single word. They never filed a report. Evelyn would confirm it later. There was no record of her call, no evidence of her complaint, nothing at all to show she had ever asked for help. The system was not failing. It was performing exactly as it was meant to for the rich and powerful. She was neither. As night settled over the city, Evelyn found herself inside the downtown bus station. She had been walking aimlessly for hours, desperate to figure out her next move. She did not have a phone to ask for help, a credit card to get a hotel room, or any friends who had not already been turned against her by the Lancasters' rumors and social games. She was left with $47 and absolutely no place to go. At least the bus station was warm. It had plastic benches where she could rest without being bothered. It had vending machines that offered food she could buy. On the wall, there were schedules for routes that led to different cities, different states, different futures. Philadelphia, Boston, Chicago, to Denver. She had enough money for a ticket. She could choose a random destination and begin again, somewhere the Lancasters' influence could not reach. She could invent a new name, get a new job, and forge a new life from the ruins of her old one. But her children were here. Emma, Sophia, and James. She had given them their names in secret during the long months she was pregnant, back when she was the only person who saw them as individuals instead of just heirs to the Lancaster name. She had whispered their names to her belly late into the night, vowing that she would always love them, that she would always protect them. How could she possibly leave them now? How could she get on a bus and ride away, knowing her babies were in the care of monsters? She was still grappling with this impossible choice when Gloria's phone began to ring. Evelyn just stared at it. She had completely forgotten it was in her jacket pocket, right next to the business card Gloria had pressed on her. She had not given the number to anyone. Nobody even knew she possessed the phone. The caller ID displayed Marcus Webb, Esquire. She answered, "This is Evelyn Carter." The voice on the other end was a man's, professional, and tinged with urgency. "My name is Marcus Webb. I was your mother's lawyer. I have been attempting to contact you for 2 days. My mother passed away 2 years ago," Evelyn replied. Her voice was empty and flat with exhaustion. She did not leave behind much of an estate. There was a brief silence on the other end of the call. "That is what you were made to believe," Marcus said, carefully. "But there are things about your mother that you do not know, Evelyn. Things she wanted you to find out when the time was right." "What are you talking about?" "I cannot get into it over the phone. I need you to be at my office tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Can you manage that?" Evelyn almost let out a bitter laugh. "I do not have a place to sleep tonight. I only have $47. I don't even have my ID. There is a hotel on 5th Street, Marcus said instantly. "The Riverside Inn. When you get there, ask for room 12. The room is already paid for. There will be clothes and a meal waiting for you. Get some sleep, Evelyn. Tomorrow your life is going to change." He hung up before she could ask another question. Evelyn looked down at the phone in her hand, trying to process the conversation. Her mother had been a nurse, a middle-class woman who worked hard and barely made enough to cover the mortgage. She had struggled to keep food on the table. Helen Carter had driven a 10-year-old Honda, bought her clothes at secondhand shops, and clipped coupons from the Sunday paper. What could she have possibly left for Evelyn that would involve a secretive lawyer and a prepaid hotel stay? But Evelyn was far too tired to think about it anymore. She had been awake for almost 40 hours straight. Her body was still healing from giving birth, and now someone, for reasons she could not begin to guess, was offering her a warm bed and a hot meal. She walked to the Riverside Inn on 5th Street. It was a simple place, not too fancy, but not run down either. It was the type of clean, anonymous hotel that business travelers often used. The clerk at the front desk looked up as Evelyn came in, observed her messy appearance, and gave a small nod as if he knew she was coming. "Room 12, he said, pushing a key card across the counter. "Everything has been taken care of." "Who took care of it?" The clerk's expression stayed perfectly neutral. "I was not provided with that information, ma'am, but the gentleman who called did ask me to tell you that your mother loved you very much." The room was basic, but spotless. It had a queen bed with fresh white sheets, a desk and lamp, and a bathroom with soft towels and small bottles of shampoo. On the bed was a shopping bag. Inside were clothes in Evelyn's size, jeans, a sweater, underwear, and sneakers. It was everything she would need for whatever the next day held. On the desk was a tray with a silver food cover. When Evelyn lifted it, she discovered a hot meal of chicken, vegetables, and bread, along with a small bottle of wine. It was real food, not something from a vending machine. And on the pillow, there was a handwritten note on expensive paper. "Your mother loved you more than you know. Sleep well. Tomorrow you fight back." The note was not signed. Evelyn stood in the center of the room, holding the note in her shaking hands, and felt something change inside her. Someone was looking out for her. Someone her mother had trusted to carry out these instructions at this very moment. Someone who thought Evelyn Carter was strong enough to fight back. She had no idea who this person was. She had no idea what tomorrow had in store for her. But for the first time since she left that hospital room, she felt something besides utter despair. She felt a tiny flicker of hope. She ate the food without really tasting it. She took a shower without really feeling the water. She changed into the clean clothes and got into the clean bed. And for the first time in 5 years, she fell asleep without anyone else telling her when she had to wake up. The offices of Marcus Webb occupied the entire 14th floor of a glass skyscraper in the financial district. Evelyn showed up at exactly 9 in the morning. She was wearing the clothes that had been provided for her and felt like a fraud in a world she did not belong to. The lobby was a sea of marble and chrome, filled with important-looking people in expensive suits. They all rushed past her without a single glance. The elevator ascended with a smooth silence and opened into a reception area that smelled of leather and generational wealth. Miss Carter, a young woman with a friendly smile, stood up from behind a large mahogany desk. Mr. Webb is waiting for you. Please come this way. She walked Evelyn down a hallway decorated with framed law degrees and pictures of Marcus Webb shaking hands with various powerful-looking figures. The corner office at the very end had windows from the floor to the ceiling that offered a panoramic view of the city. Marcus Webb himself was a man in his late 50s, with gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses. He had a face that looked like it had seen so much of the world's darkness that it could no longer be surprised by anything. He rose as Evelyn came in and pointed to a leather chair in front of his desk. Please have a seat. Can I offer you anything? Coffee? Water? Answers, Evelyn said as she sat down. I would like some answers. Marcus gave a slow nod, as if this was exactly what he expected. You will get them, but Evelyn, you need to prepare yourself. The story I am about to share will completely change how you see your mother and yourself. He began from the very start. Your mother first came to see me 15 years ago, Marcus explained, opening a large folder on his desk. She had just sold her company for $800 million. Evelyn stared in disbelief. I am sorry. What was that? Her business was called Hayes Medical Supply. She started it 23 years before that day, built it from the ground up, and then sold it to a massive corporation for $800 million. My mother was a nurse, Evelyn said, her voice slow, as if she were talking to a child who was confused. She was at St. Vincent's Hospital for 30 years. She could barely afford to keep our lights on. That is the story she wanted the world to believe. Marcus took out a paper and pushed it toward her. Your mother was a genius, Evelyn. While working all those nights at the hospital, she saw all the problems in the medical supply system. She saw equipment that was overpriced, supplies that went to waste, and procedures that were inefficient. So she decided to fix it. In her free time, she launched a company, all while raising you by herself and holding down a full-time job. She built a whole new business from nothing. She found investors who shared her vision. She brought in a team to handle the daily work. Her smart choices transformed that little medical supply company into a powerhouse in the field. Evelyn just shook her head. That is not possible. I would have known about it. I was in the same house with her for 18 years. I think I would have seen her running a secret business empire. Are you sure about that? Marcus asked softly. Your mother was incredibly cautious. She operated under a different name for all her business dealings. The company headquarters was located in another city. She used a complex system of holding companies and trusts to ensure her name never appeared on any public documents. She did it all to keep you safe, Evelyn. She was absolutely terrified that if anyone discovered the money, it would corrupt you. Or worse, it would bring dangerous people into your life. Evelyn's mind flashed to Garrett Lancaster, so charming and focused as he charmed her at a charity event. Dangerous people. So she kept it a secret? Evelyn asked, processing the idea. All that time she kept it from the entire world, and that included you. She sold the company 3 years before she passed away. $800 million. She invested that money wisely and watched it multiply. By the time she died, her personal fortune was more than $1 billion. $1 billion. The figure was so huge, so utterly beyond belief, that Evelyn's mind couldn't even grasp it. That just can't be true, she whispered. It is true, and she left every last cent of it to you. Marcus produced another document, this one much thicker and more formal. This is the official Helen Carter Family Trust. Your mother created it 2 years before she passed, right after she received her cancer diagnosis. She moved everything she owned into it, from real estate to stock portfolios, including the profits from the original sale that had grown over the years. As of this morning, the total value of the trust is $1.2 billion. Billion? Evelyn echoed. You mean with a B? Why wouldn't she tell me? Evelyn asked as tears began to roll down her cheeks. Why would she let me struggle for so many years? Why did she let me walk into a marriage with Garrett without a single warning about who he really was? Marcus looked at her with compassion. She desperately wanted to tell you. She came close to telling you at least 100 different times. But she was scared, Evelyn. She was scared the money would ruin your relationship. Scared you would see her differently if you knew she was hiding such a huge secret. And she was most afraid of what might happen if the wrong people learned the truth. The wrong people? Evelyn asked again. The Lancasters. Marcus leaned back, took off his glasses, and began to polish them with a cloth he took from a desk drawer. Your mother was aware of them, he said in a low voice, from the very start. The moment you told her you were engaged, she started digging into his family. She uncovered things about them that truly scared her. What kind of things? Mostly financial crimes, things like tax evasion, fraud, and embezzling money from charities. The Lancaster family fortune is not nearly as legitimate as they pretend it is. Margaret in particular has been secretly taking money from their foundation for years. Why did she not say anything to me? She made an attempt. Do you recall the time she invited you to lunch? About a month before your wedding? Evelyn searched her memory. Yes, she remembered. Helen had been acting strangely serious that day, almost on edge. She had tried to bring something up multiple times, but always stopped short. She told me she had something important to discuss, Evelyn recalled slowly, but then she just dropped it. She said it could wait for another time. She couldn't go through with it, Marcus confirmed. She explained to me later that she saw how happy and in love you looked, and she just couldn't find the words to shatter your happiness. She hoped that maybe she was mistaken about the Lancasters. She thought that perhaps they would prove her wrong. She hoped everything would be okay, but it was not okay. No, it certainly was not. Marcus got up and went over to the window, staring down at the city below. When she finally understood how terrible things had become, she came back to me. This happened about 6 months before she died. She told me she could see what they were doing to you, but she knew you were not in a place to listen. You would have accused her of trying to ruin your marriage. She was right about that, Evelyn confessed in a small voice. I would have stood up for Garrett. I would have chosen his side. Your mother knew you would. So she did the only thing she could. She put a safety net in place for you, which is actually more like a weapon, for you to use when you are finally ready to see the truth. What kind of weapon? The trust is conditional, Marcus clarified. Your mother needed to be sure the money couldn't be taken from you. She wanted to guarantee you couldn't be tricked into signing it away, so she created 3 specific triggers to activate it. They are when you turn 35 years old, the death of your husband, or your divorce from your current husband. Evelyn became completely still. Divorce? Those documents you signed in the hospital, Marcus said, turning back to look at her. They were not just the conclusion of your marriage, Evelyn. They were the key to your inheritance. The instant your signature was on that page, the trust became active. By the time Garrett drove out of the hospital parking lot, you were officially a billionaire. He did not know, Evelyn whispered. He had absolutely no idea. Not a single one of them knew. Your mother kept this secret from the entire world precisely because she knew that a family like the Lancasters would never release their grip on that kind of wealth. If they had any idea you were an heiress, they would have never agreed to a divorce. They would have come up with some other method to control you, another scheme to get their hands on your fortune. But since they did not know, they just threw me out. They believed they were getting rid of worthless trash, Marcus said, with a grim smile. They never imagined they were throwing away a fortune in gold. Evelyn was quiet for a long time, trying to absorb everything she had just been told. Her mother had secretly been a billionaire. Her mother had known the truth about the Lancasters. Her mother had set a trap, waiting for the perfect moment when Evelyn would need it the most. And Garrett, blinded by his own arrogance and cruelty, had stumbled right into it. "What do I do now?" Evelyn finally asked. "Now you have options," Marcus replied. "You can take the money and vanish. Start a new life somewhere the Lancasters could never find you, and just try to put all of this behind you. Or you can stand and fight. You can use these assets to get your children back and utterly destroy the people who tried to destroy you." How? The Lancasters have broken laws, Evelyn. Serious laws, with actual proof. Your mother started collecting some of that proof before she passed away. And there is more of it out there. If we can gather enough evidence, we can take them down for good. We are talking about criminal charges, frozen assets, and even jail time. And what is most important, we can use their illegal activities to invalidate that prenuptial agreement and give you back your rights as a mother. How much time would that take? 6 months, Marcus answered. Maybe a bit less if we get some breaks, maybe longer if they decide to fight us every step of the way. 6 months away from my children. I know, and I am not going to suggest it is a simple decision. Evelyn pictured her babies, Emma, Sophia, and James, asleep in their fancy cribs, being cared for by nannies who could never love them like she did. They were getting older with each passing day, learning to see faces that were not her own. 6 months of their childhood. 6 months of milestones she would never see. 6 months of Margaret whispering lies into their ears about the mother who left them. The thought was impossible to bear, but the alternative was even worse. To charge after the Lancasters right now with only her anger and $1 billion. They planned to drown her in legal maneuvers using endless delays and countersuits. The custody fight would be dragged out for years, maybe even a decade. They would completely poison the children against her, so even a victory would feel like a total loss. She had to be clever. She had to have patience. She had to dismantle their power to even fight back before the battle truly started. 6 months, Evelyn stated softly. I realize it is a long time. When Evelyn looked up, Marcus saw something in her eyes that made him sit up straighter. The broken woman was gone. The terrified, manipulated person who signed divorce papers from a hospital bed had vanished. In her place was someone new, someone reborn from the ashes of betrayal and grief. She had become dangerous. I need everything, Evelyn said. Tell me every piece of information my mother collected on the Lancasters. Show me how to get more. Give me a precise blueprint for their ruin. A smile of pure satisfaction spread across Marcus Webb's face. The following 2 months were a crash course in reinvention. Evelyn relocated to a small apartment. She found a place in a blue-collar neighborhood across town, paid with cash, and used her maiden name. Only Marcus knew her new address. To the Lancasters, it was as if she had simply ceased to exist, just as they had wished. But she had not disappeared. She had just gone off the grid. Her first move was to get her nursing license reinstated. It had expired during her years as a Lancaster wife, but her qualifications were still sound. She dedicated 2 weeks to studying, sat for the necessary exams, and passed them easily. Before the first month was over, she was once again a legally registered nurse. Her second move was finding a job. Not just any job, but a night shift position at Metropolitan General Hospital. This was the same hospital where members of their Lancaster Foundation board went for their health care, the one where Margaret served on the board of directors, and the one where the proof of their corruption was buried in file cabinets and billing codes. It was a massive gamble. If anyone recognized her, If news of her working there got back to the Lancasters, her entire plan would crumble. But this was also a chance she could not afford to miss. So, she altered her look, cutting her hair short and dyeing it a new color. She started wearing non-prescription glasses, always kept her head down and her mouth closed. She faded into the background, becoming another anonymous face that people on the night shift often are. She was just one more nurse, another person filling a space on the roster. Nobody looked at her twice. The proof started to surface almost right away. Evelyn had long thought the Lancaster Foundation was committing Medicare fraud. Years ago, she had stumbled upon some questionable invoices after accidentally walking into Margaret's home office. Margaret had erupted in fury, yelling at her to leave, and Evelyn never understood the reason. But now she did. The billing records were a tangled web of fake services and wildly inflated costs. There were charges for procedures that were never performed, medications that were never given, and physical therapy for patients who couldn't even walk. Evelyn took pictures of it all. In the dead of night, when the hospital was still, she would log into the billing system and capture every single fraudulent entry. She sent the files to Marcus using encrypted software, building her case one piece at a time. But she needed more than just paperwork. She needed witnesses. Gloria Santos was the first person she brought on board. They arranged to meet at a small cafe 3 weeks after Evelyn started her new job. Gloria was shocked to get her call, and even more stunned to find out Evelyn hadn't left town like everyone thought. "You want me to go up against the Lancasters?" Gloria asked, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Are you crazy? They will ruin me. I have a mortgage. My daughter is in college. I can't risk losing my job." "I get it," Evelyn said, "and I'm not asking you to do a thing right now. I'm only asking you to watch and listen. If you notice anything, write it down. When the time is right, you will be protected." What kind of protection? The kind that money buys, a life-changing amount of money. Gloria looked at her for a long, silent moment. "You are not the same," she said at last. "Something about you has changed." "Everything has changed," Evelyn answered. "I remembered who I used to be." Gloria gave a slow nod. "All right, I am in. But you have to give me your word on something. What is it? Promise me you'll make them answer for what they put you through in that hospital room, and for all the other women they've likely done it to. Swear to me you won't give up until they have nothing left." Evelyn met her gaze directly. "I promise." In the weeks that followed, Gloria discreetly recruited other nurses who had seen questionable things at the hospital. These were women who had witnessed building codes being altered after inspections, who had been pressured to alter records, and who had been let go for asking too many questions. They were all terrified. In this city, the Lancaster name was powerful, and nobody wanted to be crushed by it. But they were also filled with anger. They had witnessed too much and had been quiet for far too long. Now, finally, someone was giving them a way to fight back. By the end of the second month, Evelyn had a group of 12 potential witnesses. Her second key ally emerged from a completely different area. Diane Fletcher was a bulldog of a reporter who had been trying to expose the Lancaster family for years. She had published articles raising doubts about the foundation's finances, suggesting unethical business practices, and hinting at corrupt political ties. But she could never make anything stick. The Lancasters were too influential, too well-connected, and too skilled at hiding their wrongdoing. Every trail she followed went cold. Every source she developed was either paid off or scared away. Evelyn located her through a series of old online newspaper archives. She set up a meeting in a coffee shop far across the city. It was well away from any place the Lancasters might be watching. Diane was a tough-looking woman in her mid-40s, with piercing eyes and the type of weary resolve that comes from fighting battles you know you might not win. "Who are you?" Diane asked as she slid into the booth opposite Evelyn. "I'm someone they underestimated." Evelyn pushed a folder across the table. Diane opened it, and her eyes widened in surprise. "Where did you get this? Does it really matter?" Diane glanced up, examining Evelyn's face as if trying to piece together a puzzle. "What is it you want?" "I want to bring them down," Evelyn said plainly, "and I want your help to do it." By the close of the third month, her arsenal was growing. She had the hospital fraud evidence from Gloria and the other nurses. She had financial records from county offices that Marcus had legally obtained. She had statements from former Lancaster employees who had been dismissed for various reasons and were now eager to talk. But she still lacked a critical piece of the puzzle. She was missing someone who had been on the inside of the family. She needed someone who had witnessed the Lancasters' private operations, someone who could speak to their true nature, their tactics, and their ruthlessness in crushing anyone who opposed them. She needed Claire. The email appeared at 3 in the morning. Evelyn was in her apartment, looking over financial reports from Marcus, when her computer chimed. The sender was untraceable, and the subject line was empty. The message itself held only an address and a time. She knew she should delete it. She should have seen it as a trap, a Lancaster plot to lure her out of hiding. She knew better than to be this reckless, but a strong feeling urged her to go. The meeting was set for a small cafe in a part of the town Evelyn had never been to. She got there 15 minutes ahead of schedule and chose a corner booth with her back against the wall, keeping an eye on the entrance. At precisely 3 in the afternoon, Claire Ashford entered. She was different from the pictures Evelyn had dug up in her research. She was thinner, with dark shadows beneath her eyes. Her pregnancy was obvious now, maybe 7 or 8 months along. She looked like a woman who hadn't had a peaceful night's sleep in a very long time. Claire settled into the booth on the other side of Evelyn's table. For a long, quiet moment, she just sat there, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea she never ordered. "You have to hate me," she finally whispered. Evelyn thought about it for a second. "I definitely did," she admitted. "For a while, I would just lie awake all night, thinking about you. I'd wonder what you looked like, what your voice sounded like, and what you possessed that I was missing. In my mind, I turned you into a villain who had charmed my husband and completely wrecked my marriage." Claire visibly winced but held Evelyn's gaze. "But now, I see that you were not the issue," Evelyn continued. "Garrett was the issue. His whole family was the issue. You were just one more person they hurt." "I was not a victim," Claire said, her voice laced with bitterness. "I knew exactly what I was doing. I knew he had a wife. I knew everything he told me was a lie. I just ignored it because he promised he would leave you for me, and I was desperate to believe someone could actually love me." That kind of desperation was something Evelyn understood all too well. She had been there herself a long time ago. "So what was different this time?" she asked. Almost without thinking, Claire's hand drifted to her stomach in a protective gesture. "He told me to get rid of it," she said softly. "The moment I told him I was pregnant, he said I needed to handle it the same way he handled you. He wanted me to make the baby just go away. And when I said no, he told me his mother would figure something out." A chill ran down Evelyn's spine. "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means I started recording every conversation we had," Claire explained. "I finally realized I was never going to be his wife. I was just another problem he needed to solve, and I had to protect myself." She took out her phone and slid it across the table. That is 6 weeks of recordings, Claire said. You will hear Garrett planning how to hide his money in offshore accounts before the divorce is done. You will hear Margaret explaining how to fake charity records, and Richard bragging that he has family court judges in his pocket. It is everything you need to bring them down. Evelyn took the phone and began looking through the audio files. There were dozens of them, totaling hours of conversation. It was the kind of proof that would confirm everything she had already discovered, and then some. "Why are you doing this for me?" she asked. "Because I have a little girl," Claire said, her voice starting to break. "Her name is Lily. She is 4 years old. Her father walked out and left us with absolutely nothing. And I've spent the last 3 years just trying to build a decent life for her. I really thought Garrett was our way out. I thought he would look after us. I could not have been more wrong." She leaned in closer, her eyes filled with intensity. "I am not foolish enough to believe I can fight them and win," she said. "They would destroy me just like they did to you. But you are not like me. You have money, you have a strategy, and you have a reason to fight that is bigger than money or getting even. You have your children." The two women sat in silence, a pair who should have been bitter rivals, now connected by the shared pain of being used and thrown away by the very same man. "There is something you need to be very clear about," Evelyn said after a moment. "This will not be simple. When I take the Lancasters down, there will be fallout. Your entire relationship with Garrett is going to become public news. People are going to judge you for it." "Let them," Claire shot back. "My whole life has been one big judgment, for being a single mom, for never having enough money, for making choices I am not proud of. I am done caring what other people think. All I want is for my daughter to be safe. I want her to grow up in a world where the Lancaster family can never hurt anyone again. And this baby." Claire's hand found her belly once more. "This baby will grow up never knowing its father," she said softly. "That is the best gift I can give it. A completely fresh start, a life untouched by the Lancaster poison." Evelyn gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Okay," she said. "Then we have an agreement." Later that night, alone in her apartment, Evelyn listened to every single recording on Claire's phone. She heard Garrett talking about secret offshore accounts and shell corporations. She listened to Margaret detail which documents needed to be changed and which ones needed to be completely destroyed. She heard Richard's laughter as he boasted about the police, the judges, and all the other people whose loyalty was for sale. But one conversation in particular made her blood turn to ice. It was recorded 3 months ago, the day after Evelyn had signed the divorce documents. "She is finally gone," Garrett had said, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "She signed every page without even reading it. My mother was right all along. She was just too stupid to put up a real fight." "Did you feel anything at all?" Claire had asked him. Garrett just laughed. "Relief," he said. "Nothing but pure relief. That was 5 years of my life, pretending to care about someone who was never going to be good enough. It is finally done." Evelyn played that recording 3 separate times. Then, the burning anger in her heart cooled and hardened into something else. A cold, sharp-edged determination. By the end of the 4th month, Evelyn had everything she needed to move forward. The proof of hospital fraud from Gloria and the other nurses was detailed and absolutely damning. Claire's recordings fully supported the financial crime allegations and showed just how deep the Lancaster corruption went. Sworn statements from 12 different former employees painted a clear picture of a family who believed they were completely above the law. Marcus had found a federal prosecutor named Sarah Collins, who was one of the very few city officials not on the Lancaster payroll. For years, Sarah had been trying to build a solid case against the family, but always came up short on evidence. Now, she finally had it. This is incredible, Sarah said, as she went over the mountain of files Evelyn had spent months putting together. Tax evasion, massive fraud, embezzlement, obstruction of justice. There is enough in here to file multiple felony charges against every single member of that family. What about my prenuptial agreement? Evelyn asked. Is there any way to get it thrown out? Sarah nodded. If we can prove the Lancasters were involved in criminal acts, when the agreement was signed, we can make the case that the contract itself is fraudulent. That would make the custody clause invalid. Your full parental rights would be given back to you. A wave of hope washed over Evelyn, the first she had felt in a long time. When can we make our move? Soon? I have to take all of this to the grand jury to get indictments. That will take some time, about 2 weeks. But as soon as we have those indictments, we can arrest them all at the same time, freeze all their assets, and serve you with emergency custody papers. They will not even know what is happening until it is all over. Through Marcus, Evelyn filed for emergency custody of her children. The court hearing was set for the very next week. There she would lay out her evidence of the Lancaster family's crimes and argue that her children were in immediate danger. If the judge saw things her way, she could have her babies back in her arms within a matter of days. For the first time, in what felt like a lifetime, she let herself picture holding them close again. Emma, Sophia, and James. They would be 6 months old by now, probably sitting up by themselves, babbling and showing the first signs of the little people they were becoming. Personalities she had missed out on completely. She would get to know them now. She would find a way to make up for every single moment that had been stolen from her. The night before her big custody hearing, Evelyn went to sleep, feeling something she had not experienced since before that awful day in the hospital room. A sense of peace. She was jolted awake by the sound of her front door splintering as it was kicked in. Everything happened in a blur, giving her no time to even think. 1 second she was in a deep sleep, and the next, bright flashlights were blinding her. Rough hands were yanking her out of bed, and a loud voice was screaming at her to get down on the floor. "Police," the voice yelled. "Do not move an inch." Evelyn did not fight back. She allowed them to slam her face into the rug, to pull her wrists behind her back with a zip tie, and to tear her apartment apart with the skill of people who knew exactly what they were searching for. "What is going on?" she yelled. "What is all this about?" "We have a warrant," a different voice answered. Someone had flipped on the lights, and Evelyn could now see that the men swarming her apartment were in expensive suits, not police uniforms. Maybe FBI, she thought, or state investigators. "You are being detained for questioning as part of an ongoing investigation." An investigation into what? Harassment, stalking, and making credible threats against the Lancaster family. They drove her to a downtown interrogation room and left her to sit there alone for 6 long hours. When the door finally opened, it was not the federal agent she was expecting. It was a lawyer, clearly a Lancaster lawyer, judging by the $5,000 suit and the smug look on his face. "Miss Carter," the lawyer said, taking a seat across from her, "you have certainly been a busy woman." "I want to speak to my attorney," Evelyn said firmly. "Mr. Webb has been notified. He is on his way now, but while we are waiting, I thought you and I could have a little chat." He opened a manila folder and began to spread photographs all over the table. There were pictures of Evelyn outside the hospital, pictures of her in the coffee shop with Gloria, and even pictures of her meeting with Claire. "Did you honestly believe we would not find out?" the lawyer asked. "Did you really think you could just sneak around our city undetected? You have been collecting your sad little bits of proof while no one was looking." Evelyn remained silent. "My clients have taken out a restraining order against you. You are legally forbidden from getting within 500 feet of anyone in the Lancaster family, and that includes the children you used to have. They are my children. The lawyer just smiled and said, "Not in the eyes of the law. Your custody hearing was also called off." The judge heard some very troubling testimony regarding your mental condition, your stalking activities, some paranoid fantasies, and a very unhealthy fixation on your former husband's family. He decided that it would be unsafe to place the children with you. Those are lies, every single one, are they? The lawyer leaned in closer. "We have people who will testify, Miss Carter. Witnesses saw you trailing Margaret around the shopping district. People heard you shouting threats outside the Lancaster property. There are many who are deeply worried about your state of mind. None of that is true. Then prove it." An hour later, Marcus Webb showed up and secured her release. But the harm was already done. The federal prosecutor was transferred to a new office. The presentation to the grand jury was canceled. The editor for Diane Fletcher killed her story right after a menacing phone call from a company the Lancasters own. Every single part of the case that Evelyn had spent 4 months putting together was taken apart in one night. "How did they know?" she asked Marcus inside his car, her voice trembling with a mix of rage and hopelessness. "Somebody talked," Marcus answered grimly. "I do not know which person it was, but an insider in our group told them everything. Claire, I do not believe so. She has just as much to lose as you do. But someone betrayed us, and now they are aware that you are coming for them. What should we do?" Marcus stayed quiet for a very long time. "We begin again," he finally said. "We rebuild the entire case. We will use different informants, different methods, and keep copies stored in several places. They believe they have won, Evelyn. They believe they have completely broken you. We will turn that arrogance into a weapon." "What about my children?" "The restraining order is not permanent. We are able to fight it, but that will require time. How long will that take? I am not sure." Evelyn looked out the window at the city lights blurring past. This was the city where her children were waking up at this moment, being given breakfast by strangers, and learning to walk and talk while she was not there. 6 months, she whispered. "You promised me 6 months, I know. 4 months have passed, and now you are saying it might be even more time. I am sorry, Evelyn. I understand this is not the news you wanted to receive." Evelyn shut her eyes and took a long, deep breath. The Evelyn from before would have started crying, would have surrendered, would have believed that some people are just too powerful to challenge. But that old Evelyn was gone. This new Evelyn had lost it all, had it ripped away from her as she lay bleeding on a hospital bed, and had it taken from her again just for trying to fight back. And she was still here. "Then we begin again," she declared. "Tonight, we will reconstruct everything they tore down, and we will build it even stronger this time. And when we are prepared, when they feel completely secure, we will strike them with such force that they will never get back up." Marcus gazed at her with a look of pure admiration. That is the way to think. The following 6 weeks were agonizing. Evelyn had to reconstruct the entire case from the very beginning with new informants, new evidence, and new witnesses who were prepared to lose everything to take down the Lancasters. She put in 18-hour days, only sleeping when her body finally gave out. She lost pounds that she did not have to spare. Dark shadows formed under her eyes that could not be concealed with makeup, but she did not ever stop. Gloria Santos was the first to help. The nurses at Metropolitan General were frightened after the first attempt failed. A number of them backed out of their promise to testify because they feared what the Lancasters would do. But Gloria was tougher than that. "I saw them take your babies away," she said to Evelyn during a late-night meeting. "I saw that woman pull your wedding ring from your finger while you were still losing blood. I will not allow them to escape justice." She personally organized the remaining witnesses, established safe methods for recording evidence, and made several backup copies that were hidden in different locations. By the close of week 2, they had even more proof of hospital fraud than they did before. Diane Fletcher was the next to step up. Her boss had stopped the story, but Diane was not ready to quit. She brought her investigation to a national magazine that the Lancasters had no power to buy or intimidate. The editor at that magazine was intrigued, extremely intrigued, but she required something beyond financial records. She required a person to be the face of the article. She required Evelyn. "I understand you have been keeping a low profile," Diane explained, "but if you want this story to make the biggest possible splash, you have to go before the public. People have to see your face. They have to hear your story. They need a hero they can support." Evelyn weighed the danger. Going public would mean giving up her anonymity, her power to move around unnoticed, and the advantage of surprise she was depending on. But it offered something else as well. It meant the Lancasters could no longer make her vanish without a trace. If anything were to happen to her after she revealed her identity, the whole world would know who did it. In a sense, it was a form of security, the security that comes with being seen. When Evelyn consented, Diane smiled. "I was really hoping you would agree to that." Claire was the last to come forward. She had been staying out of sight since the first attempt went wrong, terrified that the Lancasters would target her next. But when Evelyn contacted her, she did not waver. "I have new recordings," Claire told her. "Garrett has been in a panic ever since you reappeared. He is getting sloppy and saying things that he should not be saying." She gave her a phone that was full of new evidence. Recordings of Garrett admitting his knowledge of the Medicare fraud. Recordings of Margaret planning how to ruin the witnesses who testified against them. And recordings of Richard boasting about the judge he controlled. This was even more incriminating than what they had before. "Why are you continuing to do this?" Evelyn asked. "They have the power to ruin you." Claire glanced down at her stomach, which was now very large and only weeks away from her due date. "I am doing this for her," she answered. "For both of my girls. I want them to be raised in a world where monsters like the Lancasters are not able to harm innocent people ever again." The annual Lancaster Foundation Gala was set for the first Saturday in May. It was the premier social function of the year. Every major donor, politician, and socialite in the city planned to attend. The media would be there, and the television cameras would be there. It was the ideal setting. Marcus managed to get an invitation through one of his contacts. The name printed on it was Helen Carter, who was Evelyn's mother, the woman who had quietly built an empire and passed it down to her daughter to be used as a weapon. Nobody there would ever link that name with Evelyn Carter, the ex-wife the Lancasters had thrown away. The evening before the gala, Evelyn stood before the mirror in her apartment and studied the person she now was. 6 months earlier, she had been a broken woman, manipulated into thinking she was without value. She was trembling and sobbing when she signed her children away. Now she was a completely different person. Her hairstyle was new, her posture was new, the way she carried herself, the way she walked, and the way she saw the world with eyes that no longer apologized for being alive. She was still afraid, absolutely terrified, in fact. The next day, she would step into a hall filled with people who wished she was gone and attempt to burn their entire world to ashes. But being afraid and being brave are not opposites. Courage means feeling fear and acting anyway. Evelyn Carter was prepared. The Lancaster Foundation Gala took place inside the grand ballroom of the Lancaster Hotel. Crystal chandeliers threw a golden glow over a room made to overwhelm the senses. A string quartet played in a corner, and champagne was served that cost more for one bottle than what most people earn in a day. 400 guests in expensive gowns and tailored tuxedos were talking and laughing and celebrating their own importance. Evelyn walked in at 9 p.m., 1 hour after the gala began. She wore a midnight blue gown with a $15,000 price tag. a sign that her mother's inheritance was finally being put to its intended use. The way her hair was styled was a world away from her time as a Lancaster wife. Her makeup was applied to accentuate her cheekbones and the strong, determined set of her jaw. She projected exactly what she was: a billionaire, a warrior, and a woman who had arrived to bring an empire to its knees. At first, the other guests did not even see her. She glided through the packed room like a phantom, taking a glass of champagne from a server and offering polite nods to people who had no clue of her identity. She was searching for a single individual, one particular face in a sea of hundreds. She located Margaret Lancaster, holding court by the stage. Margaret was 63 years old and radiated more power than ever before. Her silver dress was a statement piece that likely cost more than a luxury car. The diamonds she wore captured the light from the chandeliers, casting tiny rainbows on the shoulders of those gathered around her. She was laughing at a remark from a donor, the kind of polished. Evelyn closed the distance slowly, savoring every step of the approach. Margaret was the first to notice her. The champagne flute in Margaret's hand froze halfway to her lips. Her complexion turned pale, then flushed red, then shifted to a shade that had no name but clearly signified pure shock. Evelyn offered a small smile. "Good evening, Margaret." The guests standing nearby grew quiet, sensing a shift in the atmosphere. Heads began to turn, and conversations trailed off. Margaret regained her composure with impressive speed, her expression hardening into a mask of icy control. "Security," she murmured to someone standing behind her. "Get this woman out of here right now." "I would not recommend that," Evelyn said, her voice ringing out with perfect clarity. "Not unless you want all these fine people to witness you physically removing a guest from your own charity event. That would create quite a spectacle, would it not?" Margaret's eyes narrowed into slits. "What is it you want?" "I am here to give you something. You can consider it a contribution." Evelyn reached inside her clutch and withdrew a simple manila folder. She presented it to Margaret with a smile that never touched her eyes. "Open it." Margaret took the folder and flipped it open. Her face cycled through a series of colors as her eyes flew across the pages. There were bank records detailing the path of embezzled funds, transcripts of recorded conversations they believed were long gone, and an official letter from the Federal Bureau of Investigation confirming that a grand jury had already been convened. "How could you?" Margaret whispered. "Your lawyers did an excellent job destroying my initial case," Evelyn acknowledged. "But they made one critical error. They assumed that eliminating the evidence would eliminate the crime. They seemed to forget that crimes leave traces, countless traces, overlapping traces, traces that a highly motivated person with endless resources can uncover time and time again until the mission is complete. This is not proof of anything. It is enough proof for a grand jury indictment, which was handed down 4 hours ago. There are federal agents positioned outside this building, and they are waiting for my signal." Garrett materialized at his mother's side. He looked older and more gaunt than he had 6 months prior, worn down by the stress of waiting for the inevitable. The anxiety had eroded his handsome features. New lines had formed around his eyes, and a nervous twitch in his jaw betrayed the fear he was trying to hide. "Evelyn," he said, "what is all this?" "Hello, Garrett?" Evelyn's voice was like ice. "You look unwell. This is harassment. I am going to have you arrested. For what exactly? For attending a fundraiser? For making a charitable donation?" Evelyn shook her head with deliberate slowness. "You truly have not understood any of this, have you? You spent all that time seeing me as weak and foolish, and it never once occurred to you that you might be mistaken." She then turned to face the crowd that had formed a circle around them, a mix of donors, politicians, and socialites, the very people the Lancasters had spent decades trying to impress. "Ladies and gentlemen," Evelyn announced, her voice resonating through the ballroom, "I apologize for this interruption, but I felt you all deserve to know who you have truly been supporting for all these years." She gestured toward the folder that Margaret was still clutching with a trembling hand. That folder contains proof of Medicare fraud, tax evasion, embezzlement from charitable foundations, and obstruction of justice. These are crimes the Lancaster family has committed for decades. These are crimes that were concealed with the help of bribed officials and witnesses who were intimidated into silence. These are crimes that all of you, with your generous donations, have unintentionally helped to finance. "This is slander," Margaret hissed. "Every single word of it is a lie." "Is it really? In that case, you should welcome the federal investigation that is about to commence." Evelyn glanced at her watch. "In fact, it should be starting right about now." The main ballroom doors swung open. Agents from the Federal Bureau of Investigation filed in, moving in a coordinated formation. The arrests unfolded in a precise sequence. Richard Lancaster was first. He attempted to flee and managed about 10 steps before the agents tackled him to the floor. Margaret Lancaster was next. She made no attempt to run. She remained perfectly still as they fastened handcuffs around her wrists, her face a frozen mask of utter disbelief. Vivian Lancaster followed. She screamed and sobbed, insisting that she knew nothing about any of it, that it was all her parents' doing, and that she was completely innocent. The agents were unmoved. Finally, it was Garrett's turn. He just stood there, staring at Evelyn as an agent approached him with the handcuffs. His blue eyes, the same ones that had once convinced her to give up her entire world, were now empty, hollow, and utterly defeated. "You planned this," he said, his voice low. "Every part of it." "No," Evelyn corrected him. "You planned this 6 months ago when you threw divorce papers at me in a hospital room. You just failed to realize what you were putting into motion." The agent secured his wrists and started to lead him away. "But Evelyn," Garrett called out over his shoulder, "I am sorry for everything. I was a coward. I know it does not change anything now." "You are right about that," she said. "It does not." She watched until he vanished through the ballroom doors. She did not feel a sense of satisfaction, but rather a quiet conviction that justice was at last being served. The night, however, was far from over. 3 hours after the arrests, Evelyn got a call from Marcus Webb. "We have a problem," he said. "The children are not at the Lancaster family home." "What are you talking about?" Margaret must have seen this coming. "She moved them somewhere else before the gala. The nanny is saying she has no idea where they went. We are looking everywhere, but your children are missing." Evelyn felt the blood in her veins turn to ice. She had achieved her goal. She had dismantled the Lancaster dynasty, laid bare their crimes, and witnessed their public humiliation. But her children were gone. She drove to the jail, where Garrett was being processed. He already looked like a broken man, dressed in an orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed. All the Lancaster influence and privilege gone in a single night. "Where are they, Garrett? Why would I help you? Because they are your children too. Whatever your feelings are for me, you cannot despise them." He remained silent for a long, tense moment. Then he spoke quietly. "Vermont, the vacation house on Lake Champlain. My mother sent them there with her sister. She was going to fly them out of the country tomorrow." He provided the full address. The address. Evelyn turned to go. "Evelyn," Garrett called out to her, "I truly am sorry. I know you will not believe me, but it is the truth." She paused with her hand on the door. "You are right," she said. "I do not believe you." She left the room without a backward glance. The drive to Vermont was supposed to take 4 hours. Evelyn did it in 3. The vacation home was situated on the shore of Lake Champlain, encircled by trees just starting to display their autumn colors. The scene was peaceful and idyllic, a stark contrast to the prison where her children had been kept for 6 long months. She pulled up at 4 in the morning, accompanied by federal agents and a family court judge who had signed emergency custody papers just after midnight. Margaret's sister answered the door wearing a bathrobe. "You cannot be in here," she said defensively. "Margaret warned me." "Margaret is in federal custody," Evelyn stated flatly. "These are court orders." "Where are my children?" 3 cribs were set up in a back bedroom, holding 3 babies. They were 6 months old now, sleeping soundly in the dark before the dawn. Evelyn walked toward them, her heart hammering so intensely she could hardly take a breath. Emma was in the first crib, her dark hair just like Evelyn's, her long lashes brushing against her plump cheeks. Sophia was in the second, with lighter features that resembled Garrett, a small stuffed rabbit, held tightly in her tiny hand. James was in the third crib, the smallest of the 3, sleeping with his little arms stretched out above his head. Evelyn reached down and lifted Emma into her arms first. The baby girl stirred. Her eyes opened, and she looked up at the face, gazing down at her, and then she smiled. "Hello, beautiful," Evelyn whispered, tears flowing freely down her cheeks. "Hello, my sweet girl. Mama is here. Mama is finally here." She then picked up Sophia, and after her, James. She held all 3 babies against her chest, feeling their 3 heartbeats against her own. For 6 months, she had lived for this moment. For 6 months, she had fought and schemed and given up everything for this one single instant. And now it was finally real. "I am never going to leave you again," she promised them. "Never. It does not matter what happens. And it does not matter what anyone tries to do. I will always be right here. I will always keep you safe. I will always love you." The trial began 4 months later. It became a media spectacle. It was the story of the collapse of one of the East Coast's oldest and most powerful families. It was about the woman who was cast aside like trash, only to return and dismantle an entire empire. Every major news network provided coverage. Every talk show host analyzed it. Every social media site was filled with commentary, arguments, and strong opinions. Evelyn paid no attention to any of it. All she wanted was justice. The testimonies presented were absolutely damning. Gloria Santos took the witness stand and recounted what she saw in that hospital room. She described the divorce papers being dropped on a bleeding woman's chest, the newborn babies being taken away before their mother even had a chance to hold them, and the level of cruelty that made her question her own belief in human decency. "I have been a nurse for 30 years, Gloria said. "I honestly believed I had seen it all. I was wrong." On the stand, Claire Ashford laid bare her entire relationship with Garrett. She spoke of the future he promised and the lies he told. She described how he cast her aside the second she was no longer useful. "He told me he loved me," Claire stated, "but what he really meant was that he could use me." There is a profound difference. Diane Fletcher then took the stand, presenting the mountain of evidence she had collected over years of relentless work. She showed the jury the financial trails, the payoffs, and the deep-seated corruption that had shielded the Lancaster family for decades. For generations, this family has acted as if they were above the law, Diane declared. They believed they were untouchable. They were mistaken. The jury returned with unanimous verdicts. Richard Lancaster was found guilty on every charge, receiving a sentence of 22 years in federal prison. Margaret Lancaster, also guilty on all counts, was sentenced to 28 years. At 63 years old, she would spend the rest of her life in a cell. Garrett Lancaster was found guilty across the board and sentenced to 18 years. Vivian Lancaster, convicted on conspiracy and obstruction was given 7 years. The prenuptial agreement was declared null and void due to proven fraud and criminal conspiracy. Evelyn's rights as a mother were completely restored. The court awarded her sole, unrestricted custody of all 3 children. The Lancaster dynasty had crumbled. 5 years passed. It was a warm summer evening. A lovely home stood on a quiet street, far away from the city where her nightmare had unfolded. 3 children were playing in the backyard as their mother watched from the porch. Emma, now 5 years old, was a careful and protective soul, always looking out for her younger siblings. She had her mother's dark hair and Garrett's blue eyes, but her spirit was uniquely her own. Sophia was the little artist of the family, always busy drawing pictures and inventing wonderful stories. She found something beautiful in every person and everything. James was the explorer, bold and inquisitive, forever climbing things he was not supposed to and asking questions that had no answers. They were thriving. They were joyful. They were cherished. David Parker sat next to Evelyn on the porch swing, gently holding her hand. They had first met 2 years prior at a charity gala. David was a pediatrician with a kind demeanor and a truly good heart. He cherished Evelyn for the person she was, not for the wealth she possessed. He loved her children as if they were his own. They were now engaged, with their wedding set for the following spring. "You are thinking about it all again," David said softly. "I can always see it in your eyes. Sometimes it feels like a nightmare I will wake up from," Evelyn confessed. "Like I will open my eyes and be back in that hospital room, forced to sign those documents. You are not in that room anymore." "I know," she replied. "It is just difficult to accept how completely everything has changed." David gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. "You are the one who changed it. You kept fighting when anyone else would have surrendered. You endured when anyone else would have shattered. You built this life, Evelyn, every part of it, and nobody can take it from you ever again." The children suddenly came racing toward the porch, their faces flushed, their clothes stained with grass, and looking absolutely perfect. "Mama!" Emma cried, wrapping her arms around Evelyn's legs. "Can we please have some ice cream? It is almost time for dinner." "Please," all 3 of them begged at once, their faces showing the exact same hopeful expression. Evelyn laughed, a sound that still caught her by surprise sometimes. It came so freely now, and it felt so perfectly natural. "1 scoop for each of you," she said, "but you cannot tell David." "I am sitting right here," David protested with a smile. "I can definitely hear you. 1 scoop is practically a health food." The children cheered and bolted for the kitchen. David shook his head with mock frustration and went inside after them. Evelyn remained on the porch for a moment, her gaze resting on the yard where her children had just been playing. Later that evening, she was tucking the triplets into bed. Emma had a question. "Mama, how come we do not see Grandma Margaret?" Evelyn took a breath. She always knew this question was coming. She had rehearsed her answer many times. "Grandma Margaret made some very bad decisions," she explained gently. "She hurt a lot of people. Now she needs to take a long time to think about those decisions." "Was she mean to you?" "Yes, my sweet girl. She was very mean, but you are okay now." Evelyn bent down and placed a soft kiss on her daughter's forehead. "I am much more than okay. I have you, and I have Sophia, and James, and I have David. I have everything I could ever dream of. That makes me the luckiest person in the entire world. I love you, Mama. I love you too, my sweet baby girl, more than anything in this world." She tucked in Sophia and James, then paused in the doorway to look at her children one last time. They were safe, they were loved, they were home. Later that night, Evelyn stood by her bedroom window, looking up at the countless stars. She thought about her own mother, Helen Carter, the woman who had secretly built an empire and left it behind as a shield for her daughter. A woman who had sensed danger on the horizon and prepared for it, even though she knew she would not be there to see how it ended. "Thank you, Mom," Evelyn whispered into the night. "I finally see what you did." She thought about the woman she had been 6 years ago, so young and naive, so completely in love with a man who was nothing but a mirage. The woman who had blindly signed a prenuptial agreement, who had given up her career, her friends, and her own identity because she truly believed that love would be enough. That woman was gone forever, replaced by someone stronger, someone wiser, someone who understood that while love is important, so is respecting yourself. So is fighting for what you deserve, and so is remembering your own worth, no matter what anyone else tries to make you believe. She thought about Garrett wasting away in a federal prison somewhere. She thought about Margaret, slowly fading behind bars. She thought about the empire they had built on a foundation of cruelty and crime, now nothing more than a pile of ruins and a warning to others. They had tried to shatter her spirit. They had stripped her of everything she had and then discarded her like she was nothing. They had not succeeded. The very last thought that drifted through Evelyn's mind before she fell asleep was not about payback or justice or the $1 billion that had transformed her life. It was about her mother. Helen Carter had been right about it all. She was right about the Lancasters, about the threat they posed, and about the necessity of preparing for the worst while hoping for the best. But she had been right about something else, too. Something she had told Evelyn when she was just a small girl, long before money and marriage and children made everything so complicated. "You are going to be somebody important, baby girl," Helen had told her. "Those kinds of people, they have a lot of money, but money does not make you intelligent or kind or strong. You have qualities inside of you that no amount of money could ever purchase. And one day, you are going to show every single one of them." Evelyn had indeed shown them. She had shown them all. And now, at long last, after everything she had fought through, she could finally rest. It was not because the fight was over, but because she had won. The meaning of this story goes beyond revenge. It is about reclaiming your identity when others try to erase you. It is about the unbreakable bond between a mother and her children. And most importantly, it is about remembering that your darkest moment can become the foundation of your greatest victory. If this story touched your heart, reminded you of your own strength, or gave you hope during a difficult time, please take a moment to like this video. Leave a comment sharing your thoughts and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another story like this. Your support means the world to us and helps us continue creating content that inspires and empowers. Share this with someone who needs to hear that it is never too late to fight back, and that the people who underestimate you will one day regret it. This content has been carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful lessons and lasting value to our audience. Thank you for being part of our community.